So, you want to take some of your mementos?
This is my mug.
Okay.
It's cracked.
What is it?
No, we're good.
Okay. Yeah, we looked around, so all we found was the skillets, and that's just...
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Last Tuesday night, Ellen Soul was at home with no power. When she went outside and looked up towards the mountains,
This is behind my house.
within minutes, she fled. This is her first time back.
I bought this house for myself and my dog, and it has housed me for 16 years.
What happens when a wildfire destroys more than just homes? When it wipes out history, culture, and the dreams of generations? How can a community rebuild when systemic injustices make the challenge even harder? Altadena, a historic black neighborhood once known for its resilience, is now fighting to rise from the ashes in LA. But this isn't just about fire. It's about survival, legacy, and the fight against a system that has long worked against communities like Altadena. Can hope and determination overcome devastation? Or will decades of inequality finally extinguish its spirit? Here, we would like to take a moment and thank you for supporting us and being a valued part of our strong community. And if you are not yet a member, we encourage you to join us and help build an even stronger community together. Let's get started. Altadena. Its very name resonates with strength and resilience. Situated at the base of California's San Gabriel Mountains, this historic black community has long been a symbol of what perseverance can achieve against seemingly insurmountable odds. Born out of necessity during the Great Migration, Altadena became a rare space where black families could escape the South's harsh realities and build lives defined by opportunity and hope. But hope isn't always enough to shield against systemic inequities. Decades of discriminatory policies, including redlining, left Altadena exposed to vulnerabilities that wealthier, whiter neighborhoods were shielded from. These inequities came into sharp focus when the Eaton fire swept through, bringing devastation not just to homes but to the community's very identity. But before talking about that, let's take a look at why this community is special. Altadena wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a statement. During the Great Migration, black families fled the racial violence and oppressive laws of the South, searching for places where they could live free from constant fear. California promised opportunity, but reality often fell short. Across the state, discriminatory practices like redlining and restrictive covenants barred black families from purchasing homes in many neighborhoods. Altadena was different, though not because it was free from racism. Instead, it was a place where black families fought for a foothold and created opportunities for themselves. By the early 20th century, it had become one of California's first middle-class black communities. Families purchased land, built homes, and started businesses, transforming Altadena into a thriving hub of culture and success. What made Altadena truly special was the community it nurtured. Churches, schools, and social organizations weren't just facilities, they were lifelines. These spaces allowed residents to share resources, support one another, and celebrate their achievements. The Altadena Community Church, for instance, wasn't just a place of worship. It was a cultural and emotional cornerstone that reflected the community's values. Generational wealth was another defining feature of Altadena. Families who had been locked out of financial opportunities elsewhere found stability here. Homes were passed down from one generation to the next, providing a rare chance for black families to build equity and security. But this progress came with limitations. Because of systemic racism, Altadena lacked many of the resources and protections afforded to wealthier areas. Infrastructure was underfunded, and local businesses often struggled to secure the same loans and support available to their white counterparts. This imbalance made the community more vulnerable to crises, laying the groundwork for the devastation that would come with the Eaton fire. So, how cruel was the fire? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Wildfires are chaotic, merciless forces of nature, and the Eaton fire was no exception. Fueled by dry conditions and relentless winds, it tore through Altadena with terrifying speed, consuming everything in its path. But for Altadena, the fire's destruction wasn't just about burned homes and scorched landscapes. Its impact cut far deeper, exposing long-standing vulnerabilities and inequities that had been quietly eroding the community for decades. When the fire broke out, it gave residents little time to react. The winds carried flames so quickly that evacuation orders left families scrambling to grab what they could. In those frantic moments, decisions had to be made. What do you save when everything you own is at risk of being lost? For many, that meant leaving behind generations of cherished possessions. Photo albums that told their family's story, heirlooms passed down through decades, and the small, irreplaceable items that made a house feel like home. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to ash within hours. Streets that once echoed with the sounds of children playing and neighbors chatting became unrecognizable wastelands. Blackened trees stood like sentinels over the ruins of homes, their charred branches stretching skyward in eerie silence. The fire left no corner untouched, turning vibrant, lived-in spaces into lifeless debris fields. The loss of physical structures was devastating enough, but the destruction of Altadena's heart and soul hit even harder. Among the most profound losses was the Altadena Community Church, a cornerstone of the neighborhood for generations. This was more than a place of worship. It was a sanctuary, a meeting point where life's most significant moments unfolded. Weddings, baptisms, funerals, and community celebrations. These milestones were woven into the church's walls, making its loss deeply personal for everyone in the neighborhood. Its absence wasn't just about bricks and mortar, it created an emotional void. The church had been a source of stability in times of uncertainty, a place where people found comfort and connection. It had seen the community through good times and bad, standing as a symbol of Altadena's resilience. Without it, many residents felt unmoored, as if they had lost a part of themselves along with the building. The fire also exacerbated existing struggles. Some families who evacuated knew they might never return, as their financial situations made rebuilding an unattainable dream. Others faced the grim reality of starting over from nothing, grappling with a sense of displacement and uncertainty about the future. In the days and weeks following the fire, Altadena's residents began to confront a painful reality. The Eaton fire wasn't just a natural disaster. It was a magnifying glass that exposed systemic inequities. The neighborhood's lack of resources, long-standing disinvestment in infrastructure, and limited access to disaster relief left it uniquely vulnerable to both the flames and their aftermath. The Eaton fire didn't just destroy homes and landmarks, it laid bare the challenges Altadena had been battling for years, forcing the community to reckon with the question of how and if they could rebuild from the ashes.
It was like our dream come true that we worked so hard to get here, and now to see it this way. I never thought I would live through something like this.
In the immediate aftermath, the challenges of recovery became apparent. Families who had lost everything found themselves navigating a maze of bureaucracy, trying to access insurance payouts and government aid. Many discovered that their policies didn't cover wildfire damage or provided only minimal support. For Altadena's elderly residents, the fire was particularly cruel. Some had spent their entire lives in the neighborhood, raising children and contributing to its growth. Now, they faced the prospect of starting over in their twilight years, a daunting and, for some, insurmountable task. But the Eaton fire didn't just destroy, it exposed. It revealed the systemic inequities that made recovery so much harder for Altadena than for wealthier, predominantly white neighborhoods nearby. These disparities force us to ask, why do some communities face endless obstacles in the wake of disaster, while others rebuild with relative ease? But what does this fire have to do with racial injustice? One of the most significant hurdles for Altadena's residents is the issue of insurance, or the lack thereof. When the Eaton fire devastated the community, many families turned to their insurance providers, expecting a lifeline to help them rebuild. Instead, they were met with denial letters, delayed payouts, or compensation that fell woefully short of covering the costs of reconstruction. This problem isn't new. It's rooted in a legacy of systemic discrimination. particularly redlining practices that designated black neighborhoods like Altadena as high risk. For decades, these discriminatory policies restricted black homeowners' access to affordable and comprehensive insurance, leaving them vulnerable in times of disaster. Many families in Altadena couldn't afford the higher premiums charged to communities deemed risky, resulting in policies with limited coverage or no coverage at all. Even those who did have insurance found themselves caught in an uphill battle. Insurers often exploit technicalities, such as insufficient documentation or minor policy discrepancies, to deny claims. For families who have lost everything, the emotional toll of navigating such a frustrating system compounds their sense of loss. Some have resigned themselves to the grim reality that rebuilding isn't an option, not because they lack the will, but because they lack the resources. Government aid, often seen as a safety net in disaster recovery, has also failed Altadena's residents. Federal and state disaster relief programs are designed to distribute resources based on property value, a metric that inherently disadvantages communities like Altadena. While the homes in this historic black neighborhood may be less valuable on paper, their cultural and historical importance is immeasurable. Yet the system doesn't account for this, leaving Altadena's families with significantly less financial support compared to wealthier, predominantly white neighborhoods nearby. The bureaucratic nature of disaster relief programs only adds to the challenge. Families are required to navigate complex forms, provide extensive documentation, and meet strict deadlines, all while dealing with the trauma of losing their homes. For many, this process feels insurmountable, particularly for elderly residents or those who lack access to the internet or other resources needed to complete these applications. As a result, aid often arrives too late, or not at all. Then there's the issue of infrastructure, which highlights decades of systemic neglect. Historically, black neighborhoods like Altadena have been underfunded when it comes to public services. Roads, utilities, and emergency services have long suffered from disinvestment, leaving the community more vulnerable to disasters like the Eaton Fire. For instance, outdated or poorly maintained electrical grids may have played a role in sparking or exacerbating the fire. Similarly, inadequate emergency services meant slower response times, allowing the fire to spread more rapidly. Now, as residents attempt to rebuild, this lack of infrastructure has become a major obstacle. Roads damaged by the fire have not been fully repaired, making it difficult for construction crews and supplies to access certain areas. Utilities, such as water and electricity, remain unreliable in some parts of the community, further delaying recovery efforts. These systemic failures leave Altadena's residents in limbo. Families are stuck waiting for insurance payouts that may never come, navigating bureaucratic red tape to access insufficient government aid, and struggling to rebuild in a community where critical infrastructure is still lacking. The disparities are stark when compared to wealthier neighborhoods nearby, where residents with comprehensive insurance and well-funded homeowner associations have quickly rebuilt. These areas benefit from political influence and access to resources that Altadena's residents can only dream of. The contrast is a painful reminder of how systemic inequities are baked into every stage of disaster recovery. Altadena's fight to rebuild is about more than just restoring homes. It's about challenging a system that continues to fail communities like it. Without addressing these structural inequities, recovery will remain an uphill battle, leaving many families with little choice but to leave behind the place they have called home for generations. Displacement takes a toll that goes far beyond losing physical property. For generations, Altadena was more than just a place to live. It was a community where neighbors became family, where everyone looked out for one another, and where a strong network of support was woven into everyday life. The Eaton Fire disrupted this deeply rooted sense of connection, scattering families across temporary housing and, in some cases, forcing them to relocate entirely. For many, the loss of shared spaces like churches, community centers, and parks has left them feeling adrift. The Altadena Community Church, once a vibrant hub of life events and gatherings, was more than just a building. It was a symbol of togetherness. Without it, residents have lost a place where they could find comfort, share their stories, and feel grounded in their community. Temporary shelters and hotel rooms, while offering immediate relief, fail to provide the stability and familiarity that Altadena's families once relied on. Children are separated from their friends and schools. Elderly residents struggle to adapt to unfamiliar environments, and the day-to-day rhythms of life that once brought people together have been fractured. For a community built on connection and mutual support, this displacement feels like an emotional unraveling. Meanwhile, the story in wealthier neighborhoods nearby could not be more different. With access to extensive insurance coverage, robust homeowner associations, and well-connected political advocates, these areas have rebounded with remarkable speed. Construction crews are already rebuilding homes, while community spaces are being restored or even upgraded. These neighborhoods have the resources not only to recover, but to come back stronger, often receiving priority in public works projects and emergency aid distribution. This stark contrast underscores a painful reality. Recovery isn't just about rebuilding, it's about who has the means to do so. The inequities that existed before the fire have only deepened, creating a recovery process that feels distinctly unfair. While wealthier areas leverage their resources to move forward, Altadena's families face hurdle after hurdle, from delayed insurance payouts to insufficient government aid. For the residents of Altadena, navigating these barriers requires extraordinary resilience. They must fight not only to rebuild their homes, but also to preserve the legacy of their community. This legacy is one of strength, perseverance, and cultural significance, a history that has shaped generations and deserves to be protected. Yet the question remains, how long can they sustain this fight? Altadena's residents are battling a system that was never designed to support them. Financial barriers, bureaucratic red tape, and the emotional weight of displacement create an uphill struggle that feels insurmountable at times. Despite all this, their determination remains unshaken. Altadena's residents are working together to find solutions, from grassroots fundraising campaigns to advocacy efforts aimed at securing equitable disaster relief. But the reality is, they shouldn't have to do this alone. So, can Altadena rise again? Altadena's story doesn't end with the Eaton fire. Though its scars run deep, the community's resilience is proving to be its greatest strength. Even as residents grapple with immense loss, they are finding ways to rebuild not just their homes, but their hope. Recovery has been a community-led effort, with neighbors stepping up to support one another in extraordinary ways. Grassroots initiatives have emerged as lifelines, raising funds to help families rebuild and advocating for equitable disaster relief. Crowdfunding campaigns have garnered significant support, allowing some residents to begin restoring their homes. But rebuilding in Altadena means more than replacing structures. It's about restoring a sense of belonging. The community is working to recreate spaces where people can come together, reconnect, and heal. Plans are already underway to rebuild the Altadena Community Church, not just as a physical structure but as a renewed symbol of hope and unity. Altadena's residents are also reimagining what a stronger, more resilient community could look like. Many are advocating for sustainable rebuilding practices, such as fire-resistant materials and improved infrastructure, to prevent future disasters from wreaking similar havoc. Yet the road to recovery is long, and systemic barriers still pose significant challenges. Advocates are pushing for policy reforms to address these inequities. Calls for insurance transparency, equitable aid distribution, and increased investment in wildfire prevention are growing louder. These efforts are essential to ensuring that Altadena and communities like it are better prepared for the future. Altadena's recovery is about more than rebuilding. It's about redefining what it means to thrive in the face of adversity. The community's determination to rise again serves as a powerful reminder of the strength that lies in collective action and unwavering resilience. Altadena's story is a microcosm of a much larger issue: the systemic inequities that make Black communities more vulnerable to disasters and less able to recover from them. Protecting communities like Altadena requires addressing these injustices head-on. The first step is reforming disaster relief policies. Current systems prioritize wealthier neighborhoods with higher property values, leaving historically marginalized communities to fend for themselves. Federal and state aid programs must be restructured to ensure that resources are distributed equitably, with an emphasis on supporting those who have been historically underserved. Insurance reform is another critical piece of the puzzle. Black homeowners in neighborhoods like Altadena have long faced discriminatory practices, from higher premiums to lower payouts. Holding insurance companies accountable and implementing regulations that prevent such inequities are essential. But protecting communities like Altadena isn't just about responding to disasters. It's about preventing them. Increased investment in wildfire prevention measures, such as fire breaks, community education programs, and infrastructure upgrades, can help reduce the risk of future catastrophes. Preservation efforts must also be a priority. Historic Black neighborhoods like Altadena are more than places to live. They are cultural and historical treasures. Funding for the preservation and restoration of landmarks, as well as initiatives to document and share these communities' stories, is essential to ensuring their legacies endure. Finally, protecting Altadena means recognizing the value of its people. Community voices must be at the center of recovery and preservation efforts. Listening to residents, understanding their needs, and empowering them to shape their futures is the only way to ensure that Altadena's story continues. Altadena's resilience offers a blueprint for what's possible when communities come together to demand justice and equity. Protecting and supporting communities like it isn't just about addressing past injustices. It's about building a more inclusive and equitable future for everyone. Do you think this community needs a voice too? Would you like to be the voice for them? Let us know in the comments section. What can you do to highlight their struggles as a Black community? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.